Thank you so much. I am. Can people hear me okay? Okay, awesome. Hello, my name is Renee Callahan. I'm the Director of ARC Solutions. For those who are not familiar with our work, we're a nonprofit think tank that basically works to help ensure wildlife crossings are built wherever they're needed. I want to thank you all. Here it is, last day of a long conference, a lot of drinking from the fire hose. So you're here, you made it. Thanks for coming out. I do want to note that in addition to ARC, I am presenting, including Marta, I am presenting this talk on behalf of Darin Martens as well. He is a landscape architect with a rich history of working in this field, most recently as part of the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. Oops. Let's see. There we go. Sorry, wasn't hitting the button hard enough. Even though Darin actually left MPS last month, he was part of a team that presented on this topic during the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance National Community Assistance Training. This happened last August in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And that training really motivated us to want to share some of the key resources that we used for that training as part of this conference. So like highways, trails are ubiquitous across our landscape. This map just shows a tiny fraction of the total trails in the US. This is just the national trails. So do not be fooled. I'm sure each of you know that this is, again, just a tiny fraction, but it was the best map I could find. So I want to take you on a whirlwind tour of 3 seminal works in this relatively new community of practice, which is known as recreation ecology. At the same time, I want to make clear I am presenting this work not as a contributor or an author, but solely to advance our core mission of communicating and tech transfer when it comes to next and best practices. So basically people can share lessons learned and not reinvent the wheel. I think, historically, there's been an assumption that non-motorized travel is relatively benign on trails. But in fact, some of the new research that's coming out is showing us that our presence has a much more significant impact than originally thought. One of the core concepts that is being used to detect this effect is known as the corridor of influence, which is basically the distance at which your presence on a trail can be detected by wildlife on either side of that trail. There are several ways that trail use may affect wildlife. The type and severity of the impact, not surprisingly, depends a lot on what species is present, the season, the time of day, and where the trail is located. The disturbance can result in a myriad of effects, from changes in behavior to effects on reproductive success. One of the 3 seminal papers I want to showcase is this one by Dr. Kathy Zeller, who along with her colleagues tested the effect of recreation noise and type on wildlife. These researchers found that noise from human recreation again, appears to have these potentially far-reaching effects on wildlife, including, I think, really significantly, that the presence of noise without any human presence, this was an experimental treatment in which the noise was played, but people were not actually on the landscape. But even without the actual individual being present, it caused increased vigilance and fleeing, again, despite the fact that there was not a potential predator actually physically present. As shown here, this is a couple of key graphics from Dr. Zeller et al., her and her fellow researchers report. They found that wildlife were roughly 3 to 5 times more likely to flee, and that they were extra vigilant for 2 to 3 times longer after hearing recreation noise compared to the control of natural sounds with no recreation noise. And these effects persisted. They were also apparent the following week when wildlife abundance within these treatment areas were 1.5 times lower than prior to the experimental noise deployments. So as shown on the left, and perhaps not surprisingly, elk were the most sensitive. Patty always calls them the problem children when it comes to crossing. So they were the most sensitive to noise. And I think also really interesting to me was the fact that if you look at that on the right-hand side and the purple circle, a small group of non-vocal off-road highway vehicles, how they compare to recreational types, I think, that have historically been viewed, again, as more benign, so non-motorized recreation. So that I thought was very interesting as well. So this leads to kind of the crux, how do we make wildlife trails more wildlife friendly? And as with roads, we can sort of take this, this trio of approaches. We can try and change animal behavior, we can try and change human behavior, or we can seek to structurally separate the two. And this actually leads me to the other two seminal works on this emerging topic that I want to highlight. And the first is from New Hampshire Game and Fish. And the second is from right here in Colorado. I really want to thank Michelle Coorden with Colorado Parks and Wildlife for bringing this report to our attention. It was really instrumental in our training last year. And each of these pubs provides guidance on designing wildlife-friendly trails, including, again, as with roads, employing an initial framework of, are there opportunities to avoid sensitive species or areas? Are there opportunities to minimize the effects of the trail? And then finally, when these fail, are there opportunities to mitigate those effects? I won't go into detail on these slides, but they flag a myriad of sort of guidance, again, key considerations, same types of things that you see with roads a lot of times, sort of, what does it look like in terms of the ecology? What does it look like in terms of the overlapping of the pavement with the desire of animals to move as they seek to meet their needs? There were a number of, again, sort of key principles and questions to ask as you're thinking about ways to either avoid, minimize, or mitigate. And then in addition, these other factors to consider. And I think one of the things that really sort of struck me about this is the use of signage. I mean, we know that signage is effectively, is pretty ineffective. Static signs are pretty ineffective when it comes to reducing wildlife vehicle collisions. But this is really a largely unexplored area for trails. So for example, if you have a trail sign that alerts users to a seasonal closure or another restriction, do they actually listen to and follow those signs, or are they like, the motorists who become habituated and ignore them when you drive out of Yellowstone and it says wildlife next 52 miles? So I also want to flag this chart. This is from the Colorado report. It does a beautiful and succinct job of compiling species-specific recommendations for minimizing the effects of people and recreation on wildlife. And again, I just want to thank Dr. Zeller, the New Hampshire Fish and Game, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and all their many partners for their critical work on this next frontier of recreation ecology. And in closing, I would just invite everyone, whether you work on trails or just use them to recreate, to really begin thinking about the potential effect of trail recreation on wildlife, as well as potential benefits to co-benefit both people and wildlife, just as we've been attempting to do with roads for the last several decades. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take questions if we have time.